Now can everybody hear me? I believe I was on mute. Can y'all hear me now? I can get a one in the chat if y'all can hear me all right. All right, the one. All right, Shalom Israel. We are the Israelite School of Universal Practical Knowledge, started out at 1 West 125th Street in Harlem, New York, under Commanding General Yohana. And we are not affiliated with any other Israelite or Christian group. I want to say Shalom, Yahweh Shem, Yahweh Shabbat Shalaki, Yahweh Shem, Yahweh Shabbat to the brothers, Yahweh Shemor Alathan, by Shem Yahweh Shah to the sisters. Tonight is the Virginia history class, and as you all may be able to tell by the title, we are going to get into the second part of a class that we got into a couple weeks ago, where we talked about the history of our oppressor destroying our families, specifically through the foster care system. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Last week we didn't get to the second part because we talked about Juneteenth and how a gift destroys the heart. But tonight we're going to get back into the second part of that. Before we get into that, I see we got Officer Yagadar in the building. We got Officer Krishan in the building. We got my rib in the building. All right, shalom to everybody. So to recap a little bit from last week's class, we talked about how initially, uh, Salakia. Okay, shalom, sis. How Shema Thumb by Shem Shah. Sister Coletta in the building. Um, so initially we talked about not only how our families were destroyed um, through or during slavery, and how we could not have a family unit because this oppressor would have no problem selling off our wives, our husbands, our children. But during that, we also spoke about how, in a lot of ways, we'll see who maybe remembers this. In a lot of ways, our orphan, so-called orphan children, were better off, um, and to a certain extent, even during slavery. Um, who may remember what the reasoning was before that? Um, Again, to give the context, let's say a family or a wife and husband has a child, and then that child is sold off to another plantation. What might be a reasoning, if anybody remembers, why that child oftentimes was better taken care of than maybe a child now who is orphaned? Does anybody remember the circumstances where that might be the reality? Oftentimes was the reality. Does anybody remember those specifics or even a generality? Um, okay, orphaned by our village. Not sure what. I think you're on the right track, but I'm not sure exactly what you're trying to say. You say orphaned by our village. Can you maybe clarify that for me? Orphaned by our village. What does that mean? Or anybody else want to give it a shot? Why, given the context, why might a child who was sold to another plantation uh, maybe may have been better taken care of back then as compared to nowadays? Okay, get a sister a hand. Absolutely, our people cared for each other. So back then, if a child was sold off to another plantation, another slave owner, or what have you, that community of slaves would take that child in and make sure they raise that child and look out for that child. Those are things that came naturally to our people back then. It's something that we struggle more and more with now because of this wicked oppressor. And we're going to get into a lot of that tonight. All right. But that was one of the things we covered. And we're doing just a little recap right now. Just a little recap on some of the information that we went over. So that was one of the things that happened before the so-called end of slavery. And then after the so-called end of slavery, a lot of times what we did was we still looked out for each other. We still tried to find our and reconnect with our family members that we may have lost contact with. We completely understood that we had a common enemy. We had an enemy in this country, so we still stuck to each other. We stuck together, and we made sure. See, obviously, Yagadar says we were connected by our suffering, and now we are individuals from our fake liberation. Absolutely right. Give the brother a hand. Back then, we were absolutely connected because we knew we had a common enemy. We knew that this wicked oppressor and all of these other nations had no, they did not have our best interest at hand. We fully understood that in order to be safe, in order to be able to prosper, in order to be able to be a community, we had to stick together. We had to stick together. And again, Zephaniah 2 and 1, we went over it, I believe, last week. Let me actually pull it up. And we are not paraphrasing. Zephaniah 2 and 1 says, gather yourselves together, yea, gather together, O nation not desire. And that's who we are. That's who we are, not only in this country, but across the entire planet. We are the nation that is not desired. Blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans, so-called Blacks, Latinos, and Native Americans. And we understood back then that we had to gather ourselves together, and that was our strength. That was our safety. That was where our community gathered its strength from. That's why shortly after slavery, we were doing a lot better by comparison than we are today because we knew we had to come together. We knew we had to deal with each other both economically, socially. We raised our communities up and they were successful. And now we can get into some of this stuff. It blends together, right? So we know we had communities that were doing well. Again, Tulsa, Oklahoma is a famous one. Rosewood is a famous one. Seneca Village in New York is a famous one. But we've gone over in these classes how there were communities in Northern Virginia where we were doing well until our oppressor came and destroyed the communities. But we knew it was important for us to be together as family, even back then. Uh, Sister says segregation was the catalyst to keep us united. Con, absolutely, give her a hand. That ensured that we stayed together. Integration was one of the worst things to happen to our community. Integration was one of the worst things to happen to our communities because it took the resources out of our communities, it took the people out of our communities, it removed the unity that we had. It kept us from doing what Zephaniah 2 and 1 said. We stopped gathering ourselves together because we wanted to join with the oppressor. We wanted to join with these other nations. Some of us, clearly not all of us, but enough of us decided that we wanted to join with these other nations, and it completely destroyed our communities. All right. So we talked about some of that, and how after slavery, we continued to stick together. Right, forced or not, that's what we did, and it was the best thing for us. Right, and then we went on to talk about how um, even after slavery, there were still some so-called orphanages that were for children that didn't have parents or what have you, and how the push at that point was to have families take in these fatherless and motherless children, right? Which is the best thing for us to be raised by an aunt, to be raised by an uncle, to be raised by a grandmother, excuse me, those are the best things for our community because it keeps those family ties. It keeps us bonded to our family, which is such an important piece of building a nation and maintaining a nation, right? We talked about how there were studies done that yeah, it's right here. It says studies that were done. It says there were also evidence that a sense of family identity, self-esteem, social status, community ties, community and family relationships were important as a child came up. Again, this stuff is not it's not that difficult to understand, right? Everybody understands that having a family is a better way to come up. Having a family, a support system, gives you a sense of self worth. It gives you oftentimes some type of identity. Now we all know as Blacks, Latinos, and Native Indians, we are completely under a self identity crisis, right? But having a family makes it a little more easy to deal with. Having a family gives you some type of foundation for who you are and what you're worth. And there was a time as we continue to go, oh, Sister Nine in the building, Shema Alatham by Shema Alathab. I'm messing this up. Salaki. Yeah, I was Shema Alathab by Shema Al All right. But we talked about how having that sense of family was so important, and and there was a time where that was very important. It was a very important push to make sure that so-called Blacks, Latinos, and Native Indians who found, children who found themselves orphaned, it was a push to reunite them either with their parents, right, or with some type of family member, and how that was working well for a while. But then we talked about how over time, when this oppressor started changing the narrative, and so-called Blacks, Latinos, and Native Indians started being looked at as uh, leeching off the system. It became a narrative about pulling yourself up by your own bootstraps and having self accountability, and then we became the face of uh, poor parenting. We became the face of not being responsible. We became the face of not being able to take care of our children. And at that point, now mind you, during this time, we also talked about the reality is, or the reality was at the time, you had the drug epidemic going on, crack specifically, right after heroin. Heroin was more of a 70s, right after Vietnam, but then they rolled in crack. And then you had the AIDS epidemic, which hit our communities terribly. And right around this time, where our communities are being destroyed, again, because we're not following the law, statutes, and commandments, we are susceptible to these things. But right around that same time, our oppressor began to use this as a narrative that we were the face of these social safety net programs. So now the so-called crack mother and the deadbeat father became the narrative for our communities. And at that point, uh, this wicked government decided, you know what, we're less interested now in the welfare of these people. Now it's about the cost that they assign primarily to us. Now we weren't we weren't necessarily primarily the ones taking advantage and using these systems, but they painted the picture that we were because they wanted to save money. All right. So initially, there was an act that pushed to keep families together. Then, around 1997, now this is always interesting to me because so often, matter of fact, let me pull up another scripture. It's Deuteronomy 28 and 32. All right, because oftentimes we read this scripture, we speak on the scripture, we teach about this scripture. All right. Deuteronomy 28 and 32 says, thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. Now, oftentimes when we read this scripture, I think a lot of us think about historical stuff. Obviously, we think about the transatlantic slave trade. We also think about current times where you had or have had 85,000 children separated, from the so-called Mexicans. They were separated from their families, right? No one knows where those children are. CPS, all of those things. But this is just another example of how this oppressor has ripped our families apart. And again, these things were prophesied in the Bible because we, as the children of Israel, weren't following the law, statutes, and commandments. And that's why it's important to know these things so we can understand that it's not that long ago, and it's not just other so-called nations, so-called tribes. These things affect us also. All right. So in 1997, after the initial act that was exactly give the sister a hand. These things are systematic, purposeful by the hand of this oppressor. All right, and we have no might against it. We have no power in our hand because we don't follow the law, statutes, and commandments. But after that initial act was in place, and they were trying to get families back together, trying to reunite families, or have at least the very least have so-called black children being raised by so-called black families, having Latino children being raised by Latino families. That was the initial push. Sounded great. Did not last. All right. Says also although the previous legislation forced permanent placement and created some incentives for adoption, it still funded and focused on solutions that prevented child removal, because that's an important thing. You want to prevent a child from being removed from their parents. You want to do everything you can to prevent a child from being taken out of the home. Now, we also talked last time that so-called prevention opened us up to then, if you're going to receive the benefits, now you got to have the government come in and make sure, as a parent, you're providing food and sufficient housing. You make sure that their hygiene is fine. That sounds good until you realize that the government has the power to then say you're not doing what you're supposed to do. And at that point, what comes after that? Who can tell me what comes after you receive the benefits, the government comes in, assesses the situation, and decides maybe you're not holding up, maybe you're not being the most effective as a parent. What happens after that? Who could tell me? Sister Carletta says, so true that the so-called black leaders that are supposed to be fighting for us and us is the cause of integration. I don't want to integrate with my oppressor. Damn right. Get a sister a hand. Get a sister an absolute hand. Because these so-called leaders, whether it be Martin Luther King, Medgar Evers, Malcolm X, who else? Jesse Jackson, Al Sharpton, all of them. They essentially want us to. The whole civil rights movement was a beg for the love from the oppressor. That's what it was. Please stop mistreating me. Please love me because I want to love you. That is the worst message. That was the worst thing for Blacks, Latinos, and Native Indians. She's absolutely right. Give her a hand. Sister Tawana in the building. Shema. Show me how the shot says. All right. Well, who can tell me what happens once the government agencies come in to make sure that you're taking care of your child? What happens? What typically happens after that? If you are a so-called Black, Latino, or Native Indian, what happens once you start receiving benefits, so-called government benefits, and then they come in and have to ensure that you are taking care of your children? Give Officer Yagadar a hand. Damn right. They are taken and then become property of the state. That's what happens. That's what happens. It's a. We were just talking after camp the other day, and Officer Yerashima said we have to always remember that our oppressor does things in steps. Things aren't typically just thrown all out there at one time. That's not how he operates. He does things in steps. So you change a law here, you change a practice here, you require something there, you give a gift that destroys the heart, and then you tie something to it that allows him to come in and take our children and break up our families. Absolutely. So it said it's still funded to focus on solutions to prevent child removal, which is what a good act should do, right? Um, it says the initial acts initiatives were aimed at achieving permanence through reasonable, quote unquote, reasonable efforts for reunification and maintaining the family structure. All right. That's the way the thing was written. It was like you had to show that you had reasonable efforts to maintain the family or reunite the family. Now, once 1997 came, the ASFA Act, which is a different acronym, right, says, however, effectively eliminated the reasonable efforts requirement and focused on adoption as the best solution to ensure permanent placement of children in foster care. Now, who thinks that's a good thing? Kana la'a. Why or why not? I'm going to read it again. It says a new act, however, effectively eliminated the reasonable efforts requirement and focused on adoption as the best solution to ensure permanent placement of children in foster care. Who thinks that's a good thing? The water officer, y'all can go. You're gonna have to. I'm gonna get you to help me with that later. The water though. Sister Carletta said the oppressors always want to have a reason to take who we love and what we need away. Get a sister a hand. Damn right. Damn right. They understand that if they take what we need and who we love, they essentially destroy us. They destroy our family units as a way to keep us under this oppression, and they do the same thing with the resource. She's absolutely right. So the idea of ensuring permanent placement of children in foster, is that a good thing or not? Says maintaining the foster care system is a major expense, requiring a great deal of government assistance. The expense increases significantly when government programs to rehabilitate families become a meaningful part of the foster care system. So again, once you want to really do the right thing and keep families together, now we got a cost issue associated with this. Sister says that's not a good thing. What they're doing in foster care, they don't care about the children. Exactly. This has become a cost issue. They're no longer concerned. This was back in 1997. Not that they've ever been that concerned with us as a people. But now it was a marked shift from, okay, now we're no longer concerned with making sure, with the best thing for your children. Now this is a cost issue. All right. Cuba Shamaga Bar in the building. Shalom Yah Yahweh Shem Yahushua Baruch Atah. All right. Says we created ASFA. Congress in effect concluded that the reunification efforts were not worth the expense and began strongly pushing for adoption for foster care children. Now, listen, this whole trying to reunite you with your family, or maybe make sure you are adopted by a black family if you're a black child, or Latino family if you're a Latino child, or a Native Indian family if you're a Native Indian child. I'm not doing that. That costs me too much money. That's essentially what the American government said. There's too much money, so we'll just allow you to be adopted by whoever. Now, I'm not gonna ask for that prediction yet. Yes, I am. What happens in that scenario ultimately? Yes, the kids were cut off from their mothers and fathers. That's true. Just another way to get us in the system. That's true. I want y'all to catch this stuff. So the idea was it's costing too much money to try to get you all get these children reunited with your families, or get you to a family that is of your race, right? So now we're going to just we're going to just focus on adoption. Adoption is an important thing. Before I go on, because we're gonna get there, but I believe y'all can catch it. What happened to our people when the focus became strictly on adoption? My rib was close to the answer. Who want to give it a shot? I'm gonna help y'all out. Okay. Not saying you're wrong. Not saying you're wrong. Obviously, y'all can. You say lose their identity. Other nations get the kids. Not saying you're wrong. That is not a wrong statement. It's just not what primarily happened. So we talked about it some in the class before, right? Uh, Before, the push was to keep families together or keep races together. Now the push is just for adoption. We just want these children adopted so they can be in loving homes and get love and all that wonderful stuff. Do we think that increased or decreased the adoption rate for blacks, Latinos, and Native Indians? Because now anybody can adopt these children. Let's see what the sister says. She says only eligible homes are oppressor homes, and then they remove our children's knowledge. The oppressor then gets paid to keep our children. That is not a wrong statement. You are absolutely right. You are absolutely right. But think about my last question. Once you just focus on adoption, period, you're not concerned who gets these children. You just want these children adopted out. Who thinks that increased the adoption rate for orphaned Black, Latino, and Native Indian children? Increase or decrease? Somebody give me an answer. Which do y'all think happened ultimately? There you go. All right. Give Officer Yagadan a hand. Right. Essentially decrease for us because white kids would get picked first. Absolutely. Absolutely. Give Sister Tawana a hand. It decreased. Absolutely. Give Sister Nine a hand. It decreased. Absolutely. Because there was no focus now to get us with our people. So now we're just in there. We're going to get into it. But you all are absolutely right. Let me see here. Give Sister Nine. You get adopted and get molested. Right. She's absolutely right there. Particularly when we got the rare occasions that we got adopted by these oppressors, because that is absolutely their culture. Um, Says we also, this is Officer Yagdar, we also normally have sets of brothers and sisters. It would be harder to keep them together. Absolutely. They're breaking them up even more so that way. Sister Carletta says it decreased for us. They don't care about us. She's absolutely right. Decreased because it broke up the homes and spirits of more black people. That's also true. You all are absolutely right. Everybody give themselves a hand. Absolutely. All right, let's keep going. It says the House report from the ASFA, which is the newer act that was 1997, recognized that adoption is an effective way to assure that children grow up, quote unquote, in loving families and that they become happy and productive citizens as adults. Now, if any of you remember, early on in this same report, this same government, this wicked government that Esau runs, said that they understood how important it was for black children to be raised in black households, Latino children to be raised in Latino households, Native American children to be raised in Native American households, because it gave them a sense of identity. Everything I just read, I read early. They recognized it then. Once it became a cost issue, now it's just important to adopt them out so they can grow up in loving families. And that sounds wonderful. That sounds great. That sounds just as great as, God loves everybody. It's an absolute lie, and we're gonna see it in a second. All right. It says with the new focus on finding foster care, children with a new focus on finding foster care, children permanent permanent adoptive homes instead of rehabilitating families, meaning finding them a permanent home instead of rehabilitating families. Congress exponentially reduced its expenditures because now we don't have to be concerned about trying to link up these black children with these black families. Now we're saying, well, everybody can adopt anybody. And we're just gonna let it, we'll just see. We'll just see what happens. Like that, like you all caught what was gonna happen. They knew too. They were just trying to save money. Because the ASFA focused on the termination of parental rights and assistance for adoption has nothing to do with protecting children from abuse or neglect. Like the sister said earlier, they don't care about our children. Their whole thing was about reducing costs. They didn't care about whether you were neglected or abused with these new foster parents. We just need to get you through the system if we need to get you through the system. Because at the end of the day, we're saving money anyway, whether you go or not. And if you go, whatever happens, happens. Right. Right. The idea, as the sister said, was color doesn't matter, which is an absolute lie. An absolute lie. All right. It says to reduce costs, Congress shifted its focus from the concerns of the family as a whole to reducing the amount of time a child needs state support. They didn't care about the family. They didn't care about the family anymore. It's just this is a mathematical equation that they need to make sure they maximize the profit on. Very simple. All right. Now, some might say, well, everybody got affected by that. We're gonna see in a minute. No, as so often happens, the 12 tribes of Israel are more affected by these type of things than anybody else. As it was going to be prophesied in the Bible, we started out with Deuteronomy 28 and 32. Let's keep going. It says the act is designed to force states to quickly seek hearings on termination to facilitate permanent adoptions rather than waste time and money on temporary solutions. Therefore, after parental unfitness has been established under the new act, states are required to hold permanency hearings and file a petition to terminate parental rights after the child has been in foster care for a certain amount of time. Now, I want y'all to tell me, I want y'all to guess how long do y'all think it takes, or what the standard was? How long do you think the standard was for a child to be in foster care, right? For a parent's rights to be terminated? Who want to give it a shot? What what do y'all think might be reasonable? It's not quite that extreme, obviously. It's not quite that extreme. Thank the Most High. It's not quite that extreme. But to me, this was still like, in the grand scheme of things, you got to think about a child. You don't know how old this child is. Let's say the child is 5 or 6 years old. Not quite 30 to 60 days. It's longer than that. It's longer than that. But it's still, to me, it felt like a short period of time. I'm going to read this again. It says, therefore, after parental unfitness has been established under the new act, states are required to hold permanency hearings to file a petition to terminate parental rights after the child has been in foster care for a certain period of time. Y'all so extreme. Not that extreme, Sister Carla, but I get where y'all coming from. I'm not mad at y'all. I'm not mad at you. But think about the term that we're talking about. The whole idea from the foster care system is that it's some time, right? So the child comes in. At one point, again, going back to the older act, at one point the goal was to try to work with families, get them reunited over a period of time. And if not reunited with their parents, then maybe you work with their other family, some extended family, some other, if it's a black child, you work with some other, you try to find another black family who wants to take the child in, right? 6 to 12 months, 15 months, 15 months. Now think about that. At any point, right? You may have been raising your child for, X amount of years. Child may be 6, 7 years old. You're going the other way. I get where you're going, Sister Carla. Absolutely, I get where you're going. It would not be surprising. Um, but you might have been raising this child, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, and then the government comes in and says, you're not fit. We're gonna put your child in foster care, and you got just over a year to get yourself together. You got just over a year to get yourself together. Now, you all probably know, like I know, that 12, 15 months, that goes by like that. And how many of us actually can change, significantly change our situation, our living situation, in a matter of 15 months? It's almost impossible. It's almost impossible. But after 15 months, your child is now gone and you have no parental rights that quickly. Because after the state files a petition to terminate, a juvenile court judge determines if it is in the best interest of the child. Salaki. Wait a minute, I'm doing too much. Salaki, yeah, it's up to the judge, and they determine whether it's in the best interest of the child for rights to be terminated. If the judge determines that termination is in the child's best interest, the child's parents are no longer responsible and have no legal rights to their child. That quick. Gone. Shalom Yahweh, Yahweh Hashem Yahweh Shabbat Rakatah, Triple Kazaki in the building. So it depends on your heart, sis. What do you mean? What do you mean it depends on your heart? Let me know. Let me know where you're coming from. Absolutely. That's absolutely ridiculous. 15 months, and they can snatch your rights away from your child, and you no longer have any right to them at all because some oppressor said that it wasn't in the best interest for the child. And at that point, they're not even going to another family. This is just them being in the foster system. No one said that they were up for adoption. No one said that another family who was in a better state came along and said, hey, we can do better for them. No, they're just going to take the rights away from the parent. And now, as my Rev said earlier, they're just in the system. Officer Yagadar said, hard as hell to secure jobs, suitable housing, and other or rehab requirements. Plus, they make you pay the state. It's a lot of hoops to get your kids back. Exactly. Once they've been taken away, you are absolutely right. They make it completely difficult. Why? Because their mission is to destroy our family. Right. That doesn't happen with these other nations. That doesn't happen with these other nations. Matter of fact, these other nations don't have a whole lot of representation in the foster care system. And our oppressors, their representation is there, but it's very, very small. We're going to get into that too in a second. But you're absolutely right. This is all to completely destroy our families. They make it damn near impossible to get your child back. And these type of things don't happen with any other nation except Israel. All right. Says parents lose the right to participate in the child's upbringing and to interact with the child in any way. Once that gavel goes down and that judge decides your parental rights are terminated, that's it. That's it. Because after termination, the child permanently loses any legal connection to his or her natural family. Done. And again, they haven't been, it's no other family that's come along saying, hey, we want to adopt this child at this point. We're just going to make sure you don't have any rights as a parent. I was saying this is my word last class when we were on this topic. Diabolical. This oppressor is absolutely diabolical. It goes on, though. It says, additionally, this 1997 act provided financial incentives to states that place children in adoptive homes. To accomplish this goal, Congress abandoned the social policy of placing Black children in Black homes and citing that was important to development of Black children. Excuse me, Salakia. Instead, the Multi-Ethnic Placement Act and Inter-Ethnic Adoption Act, they denied federal funding to agencies that placed children according to their race or took race into consideration when making placement decisions. So they decided, if you're going to make race a factor, we're going to deny your funding. Now, again, it doesn't take a genius to figure this out, that it's important for a Black child to be raised by a Black family. It's valuable for a Latino child to be raised by a Latino family. It makes sense for a Native Indian child to be raised by a Native Indian family. But if you were doing that at this point, they cut your funding. So it says if a parent been on rehab, they can fight to get their children or child back. They can, sis, but it is absolutely difficult. It is not an easy task, as Officer Yagadah was saying. That is an uphill challenge. And it's done, and that was done purposefully. It was not done on accident. All right, but they started taking the funding from organizations that took um, race into account when they were placing these children. All right, says Congress's justification for the change in policy was that race matching policies, meaning if you're trying to have a black family for a black child, so on and so forth. It said that damaged black children by not only denying them placement with white adoptive parents, but also by causing them to languish in foster care. Now, who can tell me what the irony in that is? Who can tell me why that is a backward statement? Now, they use this statement, I'm going to say it again. Using race matching policies, according to Congress, damage black children by not only denying them placement with white adoptive parents, but also by causing them to languish in foster care. Who can tell me why that's completely backwards? Who want to give it a shot? Sister Tawana said there'll be more damage by the white families who may adopt them, making them oblivious to who they are and where they come from. That is not a wrong statement. That is true, sis. I absolutely agree with that. See, Officer Yagadar says restrictions on same race parents would make them harder to place, so that's going to increase the time in the system. Give Officer Yagadar a hand. Absolutely. Before, uh, to Sister Tawana's point, before we can get there to them being disconnected from who they are, what's going to happen first is they're just going to stay in the system. They're just going to stay in the system. The assumption there is that essentially is that white families are gonna come adopt little black kids, and we all of us know that's not going to happen. They knew then that wasn't going to happen. It just sounded good, so they could cut the resources that were being used to join us back to our families or keep us at least with people who had, our experience. I mean, we're still family even if we're not blood family, and it was purposeful to cut that off. All right. Now we're gonna go into how the evidence of how this primarily affected our people. All right. It says although the act refers to child welfare policies generally, it has a disproportionate impact on black children in the black community. Right. No shocker there. It says black children represent an overwhelmingly disproportionate number of children in foster care system, comprising 40%. And this study was done in 2006. All right. Um, Clearly, it's probably just gotten worse since then. All right. But it says comprising 40% of the foster care population, but only 15% of the general population under the age of 18. Here it says for every 1,000 white children in the U.S. at the time, 5 were in foster care as of September 20th, 2020, compared with 21 black foster care children for every 1,000 black children in the U.S. So you're talking about we were over 4 times as likely to be caught up in foster care. We had 4 times the representation, but yet the whole goal was to make sure we don't quote unquote languish in the system and we're adopted out by to other families. When the reality is the whole goal was to just save money and keep us from reuniting with our family or being raised by our people. It says in cities where there is a sizable minority and the foster care in cities where there is a sizable minority in foster care population, the percentages are even more staggering. For example, Chicago has a foster care or had a foster care population that is 95% black. 95% of the foster population in 2006 were black. It says in New York in 1997, of the 42,000 children in foster care system, all right, there's 42,000 children that were in foster care system in 1997 in New York. Who wants to guess what the number of white kids were? 42,000 children. How many of them were white? Who gonna give it a shot? I know this is a blind guess, but just guess. Last time I did that, y'all went too extreme for me. Give me a reasonable guess. Well, 42 out of 42,000 children, how many do we think were white? Obviously, I could die. I love you to death. That's my man. No, but close. You're not that off. Interesting how you 500, 1,300. Sister not said 500. One more zero, you'd have been there, Officer Yagado. So 1,300 out of 42,000, right? Let's do the math real quick on that. That is 3%. 3% were white. This clearly affects Blacks, Hispanics, and Native Indians so much more. I let us say 6,000. It was a little over. It was 1,300. So true. Bad idea. The Hebrew should be in the white family. They will mis. Oh, the Hebrew should be in the white family. Right. They will mistreat the child, slave the child. The oppressor want to have a reason to take our child away. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's all a purposeful, systematic approach to break up our families. To break up our families. Um, let's see. Uh, so, so let's think about this, right? Children are taken out of homes. That's how most children end up in foster care, right? They're called so-called orphans or what have you, but most children are not in this system as a result of losing both parents or coming up in a single parent home and losing your primary parent. That's not how it typically happens. Who can tell me um, what the catalyst is typically to have our children in these systems? When our children are in foster care, how do they typically get there? What is it the result of? Who can give me just some circumstances, some happenings that can occur that will have a child taken out of a home and put in foster care. All right, Officer Yagadar said drugs and crime. Sister Nas said mom's on drugs. All right. Sister Carletta said abandon and abuse. Addiction, lack of financial status, abuse, housing status. All right. All good answers. All good answers, right? But there was so I tell you what, uh the three sisters, each of them hit on a similar point, right? Abuse. Because that makes sense, right? It makes sense that if a child is being abused, that they should be removed from the home. So this says, contrary to popular opinion, most children are not in foster care because they have been seriously abused. They're just not. Instead, neglect is the most prevalent reason children enter foster care. But there are substantial differences between abuse and neglect. Give Officer Yagadar a hand. Someone can just report you to CPS. And if they report you to CPS and saying that your child is being neglected, then now there's an investigation that has to happen. I take a step further though. They don't always have to have someone call and report you to CPS. Because what did we say earlier? If you if we're in a position where we're receiving benefits, then that allows the government to do what? Who remembers? Oftentimes, if our community or someone in our community is receiving benefits, some type of government benefits, what does that give the government the right authority is a better word, the authority to do? All right, my rib said control. Sister Nas said to step in. Both good answers, right? But on a practical perspective, not a practical, well, a practical perspective. Like those are good answers, but what I'm trying to get y'all there. If if you're receiving certain benefits, let's say, yeah, I know this one. Let's say you have your child in the Head Start program, right? Because you can't maybe you can't afford to put your child in a daycare that you got to pay for or whatever. You're a single parent, you're a single mother, single father, whatever. There's this Head Start program. You don't have to necessarily pay for it. You want your child to learn. You put your child in the Head Start program. Who can tell me what the Head Start program has the mandate to do? My ribbon hand coming to our homes. Head Start programs is a great example. They have the mandate to do like home visits. They get to come into your home, come into your house, evaluate where you live, give their opinion on the way you're raising your child and the conditions that you are raising your child in. And if they are not up to whatever standard that the government sets, then they can take your children and say it's because of neglect. Now, it may be a situation where, you know, you're doing the best you can. Oftentimes it is. There may not be any abuse. There may not be any drugs. There may not be any crime. There may not be any of that. The cost of part of the building, how about Shana Shabbat the five, brother? There may not be any of that. For whatever reason, you just listen. We all know what it means to come up a little, come up and not have the means that other people have. As a people, that's what we're typically accustomed to. We've covered that before also, right? My rib said they can also slack it. You can ask about our personal information and experience and manipulate it. Absolutely. Because at that point, we open ourselves up. You open yourselves up to the government to come in and give their perspective on how you're raising your child. There may not be any abuse, neglect, crime, addiction. May not be any of that. But I deem you not have enough money to raise your child, and so now I'm taking your child away. That happens every single day. And this again is not anything that's old. This is happening today. Let's keep going. Um, Says children who are considered neglected are usually chronically deprived of basic needs such as food, clothing, adequate shelter, or adequate parenting practices, including hygiene, healthcare, safety precautions, and minimal nurturing attention. Says statistics illustrate that there's a strong correlation between foster care placement and poverty. We all know we are the subject of most of the poverty in this country, again, by design. As the sister said, they can be the judge of our lives. Exactly. Now, if we were in our own communities, right? If we were in our own communities doing the things that we did, as we said before, looking out for each other, spending our money with each other, the barter system is something that was huge in the black community. Maybe I don't have the money, the so-called, actual paper to do something. But look, if you look out for me here, maybe if you give me some bread for my kids to eat, then I'll come over and do some work on your house or something like that. Those are things that we used to do. They were ingrained in our culture. But once we integrated, now we don't have the financial resources to be at the level of this oppressor. Most of us didn't. Those that did were the ones that championed integration and they didn't care about the rest of the people. Now, the rest of us didn't have the financial resources. So then we have to get government assistance, and the government comes in and judges us. The government comes in and says, no, you're not doing the right thing by your child. Like I said, if we were by ourselves and to ourselves, then our community would just take care of us and each other as the rules in the Bible state, and as we did even when we were in slavery. Sister says adequate is a perspective. Absolutely. Absolutely. It's an absolute perspective. All right. It says statistics illustrate that there's a strong correlation between foster care placement and poverty. In 1998, a 1998 study reported that abuse and neglect are reported to be 22 times higher among families with income less than $15,000 per year than with families that earn more than $30,000 a year. Now, these are 1998 numbers, so they're probably going to be a little bit different, but the correlation still stands. The reality is, our people and people who are in poverty have a higher rate of being reported as abuse and neglected situations because it becomes a function of just money. And if you don't earn enough and you don't, in your uh, uh, circumstances, your home isn't enough based on what somebody else's standard is, then I got to take your children. Now, mind you, we've already said children will be taken and just languish in the system. We know that these so-called wonderful white families are not going to adopt our children, so they just break up the family. So this is especially significant because half of all black children are born into poverty in the United States. In this country, half of our children or more, because this is just talking about black children. This is not talking about Latino children. This is not talking about Native American children. For the 12 tribes of Israel, more than half of us are born into poverty. So more than half of us, it's like it, because more than half of us are born into poverty, we are going to have a higher rate of being pulled and broken up and our families broken up because of so-called neglect. Furthermore, black children are more than 3 times as likely as whites to live in extreme poverty. We all know this. We all know this, right? Uh, Says extreme poverty itself is responsible for creating circumstances that lead to neglect. For example, poor nutrition, serious health problems, hazardous housing, inadequate heat and utilities, and neighborhood crime all can result from living in extreme poverty. Because this country, so because this country is built on money. It was built on our back so that people could earn a ton of money. And if you don't have the money, then you all these terrible things you're going to be more susceptible to, even more so when we joined ourselves to this wicked oppressor. When we were by ourselves, it just didn't hit us as hard. You think about what was it? The Great Depression. Everybody, oh, the Great Depression was terrible, was terrible, was terrible. When you go back and read the history, it wasn't that bad for our community. It was what, 1928, 1930s? We were by ourselves and to ourselves. It just didn't hit us that hard because that's the circumstances that we were used to. As the sister said, it's just subjective. So what Carla says. She says the oppressors got some nerve wanting to take our children away. If you on low income, people supposed to help you, not take your children. The oppressor is not going to help us. We don't trust them exactly. But this is purposeful on their part. This is purposeful just to break up our families. Because the other reality is you break up the family, now the child languishes in uh, foster care, they're then more likely to become criminals, which then there's a you know so-called school to prison pipeline, which then keeps us where? Somebody answer the question. What does that keep us in? Given that set of circumstances, what does that make sure we stay in once we are once we have a pipeline to the prison system? Who want to give it a shot? All right, the system. That's not a wrong answer. See who can read my mind. See who in the spirit tonight. You take a child out of the home, they're not raised by their family, they don't have a sense of identity, they languish in the system, they're more likely to become criminal, they're more likely to go to jail, and then they're more likely, hold on, bondage. Exactly. Slavery. Once you are in the prison system, you are essentially a slave. Again, we've talked about it before. The 13th Amendment abolished slavery except for the punishment of crime. So the same purpose as during slavery when they would dehumanize our men in front of women, so women and children would lose respect for them. Exactly. It's all a systematic breaking down of the family. So like it says, black children are much more susceptible to state intrusion since they often live in poverty and as a result are frequently forced to interact with government agencies. Again, they're going to come into your home. This is just part of the process, as Officer Urashima again shared with us over the weekend. Esau does things in steps. So I'll give you a gift, and then I'll come into your home, and then I'll determine based on my standards that your home is not adequate, and I will take your child. They keep us disconnected. Absolutely. And when we were connected, they destroyed our community. Says the state must have probable cause to enter the homes of most American families. Most American families, they have to have probable cause to enter their homes. But if the family is receiving public assistance, such privacy rights are substantially eroded because in order to receive assistance, you must allow the state social workers to enter your home, like we said. It's part of the deal. It's part of the deal. Since you want to get this benefit, no problem. We'll give it to you. Again, gift destroys the heart. We'll give it to you. And then we're going to come into your home and make judgments on how you're raising your children based on what we feel. And you will have no might in thine hand because you have no power to stop it. These things were prophesied in the Bible thousands of years ago. Diabolical system to destroy the family. God. Also keeps our kids in the system over and over again. Absolutely. Give them a hand. Get a brother a hand. They want to keep us apart and control and in bondage. Absolutely. Now, let's step back for a second. And this is not in any of these studies that we're talking about tonight, right? But I wanna just give y'all the complete perspective. What was the first part of the breakdown of the family, of our family? What was the first step that our oppressor took to break down our family? Who can tell? I'm gonna walk y'all. Okay. Sister says slavery. Not quite. I mean, yes, but not quite. Not in the circumstances that we live in now, right? That's not wrong because they did break up our families during slavery, right? But right after slavery, we started to unite. We came together. Um, there you go. Give Officer Yagadar a hand. The first thing they did was take the father out of the home with this public assistance. Sloppy. There was a time where, because again, oftentimes we lived in poverty, right? Even when we had our own communities, and we did have our own communities, and some of them really, really thrived and they did well. But fast forward to around 60s, 70s, that's when public assistance, welfare, and things like that started being offered. Actually, it was offered maybe even back in the 50s. But part of the deal was in order for a woman to receive the benefits, she could not have a man in the home. They used to do visits where they came in to make sure no man lived there. Because if a man lived there, then you were not eligible for benefits. So they purposefully took the man out of the home because they knew he lived in poverty. They knew he wanted. Give Officer Yagadar a hand. Find the strong man. Mark 3:27. It says, no man can enter into a strong man's house and spoil his goods except he will first bind the strong man and then he will spoil his house. That was the first step. He entered, he removed the strong man, and then he spoiled the goods, which was the family. He came in, he removed the strong man, then he gave a gift to the mother that then destroyed the family. These were the steps that this oppressor took. Now let's see. All of your answers are different steps. You're absolutely right. Integration was part of it. Push drugs and crime into our communities. That was also part of it. Forced us in the hoods. I just have to name your baby daddy. Right. Right. All of these were steps in the process. But the first step was to take the man, take the father out of the home. All right. Now let's keep going. It says the state must have probable cause to enter the house of both families. And if the family is receiving assistance, however, that's eroded, they get to enter your home. Because in addition to public assistance, other underprivileged black families led more public lives than their middle class white counterparts. So who can tell me what that means? I'm gonna read it again. It says, in addition to public assistance, because there's public assistance, we all know what that means. We just talked about it, right? It says underprivileged black families lead more public lives than their middle class white counterparts. What does that mean? How is it that underprivileged black families live quote unquote more public lives? Think services. Think services. How is it that impoverished and underprivileged black people live more public lives? We want to give it a shot. Think services. Think of the different type of services that a family may need that given a certain set of circumstances will require um, would require them to get it from a more public in a more public way. Kind of give y'all the hints without giving it to y'all. All right. Not quite Officer Yagadar. That's more the public assistance. All right. So that's not wrong, but that's not what we're focusing on right now. That's not that happens too. That's more of the public assistance piece though. What other services? Okay. Getting arrested and putting on the news while our counterparts have hush money. All right. I'm not saying it's wrong either. It's just not. That's just not it. It's just not what I'm looking for. Thinks. All right. Hmm. Think general services that everybody needs. Public assistance is not what we're talking about. Think general services, basic services that anyone needs. Okay, there we go. That's one of them. Give Officer Yaga down hand. Public transportation. Right. Think on that level. That's one of them. Give me like maybe one more. Anybody can give me one more. Job search service. Maybe. Not 100% sure on that one. I don't think so. But that's possible. There's one I think y'all are missing. As soon as I say it, y'all gonna be like, oh yeah, that's true. I want y'all to get homeless shelters, not quite. Not quite. Not quite. This is services that we need and our oppressor needs. But we get it in a way that makes our lives more public and open to scrutiny. All right, Sister Tawana said food banks. All right, get my ribbon hand. She said Medicaid. We're gonna run with that because you're closest to the industry. I was thinking about healthcare, right? I'm talking about healthcare, public transportation. I wouldn't necessarily say public schools because well, I'm not gonna say most people. A lot of these other nations don't go to public schools, but our primary oppressor does. So I wouldn't necessarily say that, but I think y'all gonna get it now, right? Medicaid was probably the closest answer. It says, absolutely right. Get a sister ahead. We need our own businesses. Absolutely right, and we need to make sure we patronize our own businesses. Um, so I'm gonna read this over. It says, in addition to public assistance, underprivileged Black families lead more public lives than their middle class white counterparts. Now, here's the first example. Instead of visiting private doctors, these families are more likely to visit public clinics or emergency rooms for routine medical care. There you go. Give Officer Yagadar a hand. Damn right. Medical care. Now, our counterparts have private doctors. They have different conversations. Those doctors are set to a different set of circumstances and different set of obligations than if we walk into a public clinic. We walk into a public clinic and our child has an injury. Well, now they got to ask questions. Well, what happened? Not only they got to ask questions. Well, what happened? Now they got to. Do I even believe you? Maybe I have to call the authorities just so they can come make a report. That doesn't happen in private doctors. These are the type of things that open ourselves up, open our people up to more scrutiny, again, from this oppressor to break up our families. It's going to keep going. It says they are more likely to encounter public building inspectors, housing. Give Sister in our hand. Section 8. They are that because they have to, we have to open up our finances. People have to come in and inspect the home. There's all type of things that goes along with these uh, reliance on this oppressor for these handouts. That's essentially what it is. All right. It says they're more likely to encounter public building inspectors instead of hiring contractors to repair their homes. It says they often run their errands. This goes back to I think it was Officer Yagadar. Often runs their errands using public transportation system instead of private vehicles. Because these families interact with public and governmental agencies so regularly, their problems are more visible to child protection authorities. In order to obtain the same type of services, our people are so much more likely to be susceptible to these government agencies coming in, and as the sister said earlier, giving their perspective on how we raise our children, and then having the authority to break up our families and remove the children from the home. It says this results in their children being placed in the foster care system more frequently. Poverty alone, however, does not explain the overrepresentation of Black children in foster care population. It's not just about that, right? Um, Says child protective agencies are far more likely to place Black children in foster care than they are to place white children in foster care. With Black families, foster care is used as a solution to the problem of the home instead of offering government assistance that is less traumatic to the family. A 2002 study by the Minnesota Department of Human Services found that only 40% of Black families receive family centered prevention based on counseling compared to 60% of white families. Meaning what? Government comes in and they say, hey, this is the situation. We see the situation for what it is. The white families are far more likely to get the same kind of assistance that used to be provided to Black families. Hey, we need to help y'all. You need help. We don't need to break up your family. You just need some help in these spots. They're going to do that for white families. They're not going to do that for us. They're going to say, nope, this isn't good enough. You're neglecting your children. And now we have to take your child away or your children away. That's far more likely to happen with us, where the white counterparts get the assistance. Trickles down to child support and custody battles too. They push divorce is okay to get us to need these services. Absolutely. Get a sister a hand. Get a sister a hand. That is something, child support is something that is rampant and used and it's weaponized against Black men, again, to remove the strong man. It's weaponized. And unfortunately, a lot of our sisters have willingly picked up that weapon, and used it against the children of their fathers. The fathers of their children. I say that back. Right. As a sister said, you don't pay and you lose your license and you go to jail. And it's clearly such again a diabolical system. The first thing they do is I think they take your driver's license. Well, then how am I supposed to get to work? I'm trying to make the money to pay something, right? So then you're gonna take my license. Then I can't go to work. I can't drive to work. Then if I drive to work, you're gonna lock me up. Or if I don't drive to work, I can't go to work. Now the child support keeps stacking up. Then you're gonna lock me up. And when whose benefit is it to have me sitting in jail for not paying child support? Who benefits from that? Absolutely no one. My children definitely don't. Because any money I was making, guess what? Now I'm sitting in jail, I can make nothing. It's completely used and weaponized against our people. Right. Nobody but the oppressor benefits from that because now they have one more slave in their labor force. All right. Says in 1998, 56% of black children who entered the child welfare system were placed in foster care. Now, entering the child welfare system means you're still at home. That child is still at home. That child is just receiving benefits at that point. But 56% of children who received benefits in 1998 were eventually placed in foster care. Over half of the children who received benefits in 1998 that were black were taken from their parents, were taken from their mother, were taken from their father. Nearly double the percentage for white children. This stuff is not by accident, and it's not a coincidence. It's by design on the part of the oppressor, and it's because we don't follow the law, statutes, and commandments, and we don't have the protection of the Most High. It says instead of the state keeping the child in the home and providing counseling and in-home services to the family, black children were placed in foster care even when they faced the same issues as white children. You got the same issues, but we're gonna take you out of your we're gonna take you, little black child, from your family. The white child, we're gonna keep them here. We're gonna probably work with them. Like I said before, we're gonna work with them. We're gonna provide different services. Black people, nah. You can't raise your family. You can't raise your children. Even under identical circumstances, most white children in the child welfare system are allowed to stay with their families. While black children are ripped from their families and placed in foster care. Removing children from families due to material. It says, look at West Virginia white people who keep it. She's not wrong. She's absolutely not wrong. Listen, all of us probably know. Listen, if you ever look, I'm not gonna do that. These these folks will be in dire straits. We all know what the trash is and all that, and they are allowed to and keep their families together. And I mean, this oppressor is a diabolical beast, the most subtle beast of the field, as it says in the scripture. And the reason why they call, that we're referred to as lambs in the Bible is because we don't know this stuff. If you're not in the ISUPK, you don't know this. You need to get into these classes, stay in these classes, so you can understand not only the full understanding of what our people battle with, but why. Why is the bigger point. All these things were prophesied in the Bible, but it's the reason why. We fell away from the Most High's laws, statutes, and commandments. We stopped following the laws, statutes, and commandments. We wanted to tie ourselves with all these other nations and do the things that all these other nations do. The scripture said these other nations were not given the law, and they do not, and I'm paraphrasing, they do not know his judgments. We do. This is why we suffer the way we suffer, because we want to eat pork. We want to eat shrimp. We want to eat crab. We want to eat lobster. We want to smoke weed. We want to smoke blacks. We want to smoke cigarettes. We want to celebrate Christmas and our birthdays. We want to do all of this, all of these things that the Most High told us not to do. We don't want to worry about Passover and the Day of Atonement and the blowing the trump, the Feast of the First Fruits, and we don't want to do any of that. We don't want to do what's in the Bible. We don't put up Christmas trees. These are the reasons why we suffer the way we do. This is why we have to be subjected to this wicked oppressor, because the Most High just removed his protection. The sister said, we just want to do what makes us feel good. No thanks to the Christian church, which encourages it. Which encourages it. It tells us we can do whatever we want to. Give sister an eye. Damn right. They be super trailer trash. They keep their kids though. They keep their kids. They take like 2, 3 showers a month. Let me stop. They keep their kids though. But ours are ripped from us. Our families are absolutely destroyed as it was prophesied in the Bible. We will have, let me read that scripture. Deuteronomy 28 and 32. Thy sons and thy daughters shall be given unto another people, and thine eyes shall look and fail with longing for them all the day long, and there shall be no might in thine hand. This is not just talking about the transatlantic slave trade. This is not just talking about CPS. This is talking about our day-to-day lives as a whole. Our lives are opened up so much more to this oppressor because of the poverty that we live in. Because they took the man out of the home, they took the strong man out, and then they gave a gift of public services. And then they used that gift to destroy our homes, to destroy our families, to rip apart our children and our families, and take our men, our young men specifically, and put them into the pipeline of prison so that they can continue to use us as slaves. Right. Officer Yagadar hand through incest, abuse, drugs, and filth. They keep their kids. They keep their families together. Ours are destroyed for less. There's so much more on this, and maybe I'll revisit the rest of it at another time. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, it goes into uh, the incarceration of our parents at a higher rate, and what that does to put our children in foster care. Because we know we're policed at a high rate, we're arrested at a high rate, but because again, they want us to be slaves. So then you break up the family that way, and then it gets cycles back. It talks about how they dehumanize us as a black family. The narrative is that we don't know how to raise our children. All of this is purposeful, systematic. These oppressors are diabolical. They're the devil that the Bible speaks of. So the sister said the oppressors are not going to help us. We need to get together and help our people. We need to start the Bless the People program and make their businesses. Let's pitch in right now. I believe I see where you're going, sis. But yeah, we absolutely, as Zephaniah 2:1 says, we have to gather ourselves together. O nation not desired. All right. And with that, let me get to the security announcements real quick. The ISUPK started out at 1 West 125th Street, Harlem, New York, under Commander General Yohana. Rules for a new brother or sister. When a new brother or sister comes into the school, they are off limits for 6 months. They are to be saluted only. They are here to shed themselves of the world. They are here to shed themselves of the world. If they need transportation, the camp leader will arrange it. After 6 months, if a brother or sister has an interest in a particular person, he or she must get permission from the head to speak from the camp leader to speak to a brother or sister. There is another 6 months in which the brother and sister will court each other. After this 6 month period, the brother and sister will get permission from the camp leader to marry. Tithes, which is a commandment. You can find that in Numbers 18 and 21 and Malachi 3, verses 8 through 10. It means a tenth in the Hebrew. Ma'ashara. I believe that's how you pronounce it. Salakia from 10% of every penny of any increase the Lord gives you. Give it to the Treasury Department, or you can go to ISUPK and donate directly. Priest Fund is a free will offering for priests. It's not mandatory whatsoever amount you would like to give. Upcoming holy days. So, I had that written down. Hold on, let me get that for y'all. Thinking about it. Salaki. I believe the memorial blowing of trumpets is the next high holy day. So I have to check my notes. I believe it's September 15th. If I am incorrect, I'm sure. Um, Obviously, Raj or Captain Notches on the shot will let me know. And with that, say Yahweh Shemi Awashan Barakathum to the brothers, Yahweh Shemar Alathan by Shemi Awashan to the sisters. Class dismissed.